I am not going to enjoy any part of this video, probably, but I've been putting it off for a while, so here it goes. Back in late 2014, I made a video called Trending Up. It was basically about recognizing depression, coming to terms with it, and just recognizing that sometimes it's a short-term thing, and over time things improve. Even though I was in the process of getting laid off from my job at the time, it was kind of an optimistic video. It was meant to say that things would get better, that I would get better. But as it turned out, I was wrong. I still had that same inertial issue where if I stopped, I felt like I might stop forever. Actually, starting just got harder and harder, and a lot of days the hardest thing I would do all day was just getting out of bed. I still tried to ride through it thinking this was temporary, this was short term, this was something I would get past soon. At the end of 2015, we found out that we were going to be parents, which, as you can imagine, comes with its own types of stress, and that sort of led into a 2016, which I mentioned in my 2016 video was not great for my mental health. But I didn't elaborate as to how, and what I meant by that was I don't remember big chunks of 2016, like they don't exist in my memory. And I don't mean that in a the year flew by kind of way, I mean that in a I literally can't account for huge swaths of my time. I imagine that I spent it on Reddit and YouTube, but I don't really know. So much of the time was just spent sitting and not engaging or absorbing, just sitting. And things just got worse as we got closer and closer to the due date. I'm not what you call a baby person. Like, I legitimately don't find babies cute or interesting. I want nothing to do with them. If someone else has a baby and they want me to hold their child, I'm like, no, please don't. I've had people be like, I'm gonna let go if you don't hold her, and I'm like, then you're gonna drop your baby. And people kept telling me, oh, you know, when it's yours, it'll be different. When you first hear the heartbeat, it'll be different. When you first see their face, it'll be different. When you first see them smile at you, it'll be different. And I mean, I've never wanted other people to be right more in my life, but they weren't. Beyond announcing the pregnancy on this channel, I don't think I've really talked about our daughter at all since then, and I mean, that's not even including the fact that, you know, for the second half of 2016, I basically disappeared entirely. But I couldn't be excited about it, and honestly, that's maybe one of the worst things about 2016, is that I really wish I could have been. I really wish that Melissa could have experienced that excitement together and not by herself. I wish that when people asked me about how things were going and if we were excited, I wouldn't have had to fake so many smiles, because I faked a lot of smiles. But Melissa knew that I've never been a kid person, and the hope was that, you know, once the baby came, she would focus on doing the baby stuff and I would focus on everything else. Essentially, Melissa would take care of the baby and I would take care of Melissa. It's not a great system, but it was something we felt we could do, and maybe the best for our situation. But once Ember actually arrived, that extra stress just destroyed me, I guess. For quite a while, I couldn't do much of anything to help Melissa. I mean, for all intents and purposes, she might as well have been a single parent. I'd been taking time off of work to help out, and I'm sure having me around was slightly better than having no one at all, but in my head, I think it felt more like I was being held prisoner in a place with a tiny, screaming creature that I didn't have much interest in, who couldn't really connect with me in any way either. And that wasn't working. Like, there was no way it was going to, and it wasn't. And that became the push for some kind of action. I finally went in and sought actual help. So the result of that was my first experience with antidepressants. I started on Lexapro, or, you know, the generic of Lexapro, and there was a change. It felt like it quieted a part of my brain. Like there was some center of my brain that would occasionally broadcast these negative ideas that it just sort of muffled or sometimes entirely silenced. I didn't necessarily feel better on a day-to-day basis, but I found I spent less time occupied with thoughts about, like, you know, would my family be better off with my life insurance money than they would be with me? To be clear, I never had any thoughts or intentions of harming myself in any way, but it became increasingly like a plausible thing that I could choose to do, and that was extremely worrying, and a big part of what gave me the push to finally go in. The problem with Lexapro is that I basically had every side effect listed in the little pamphlet. For the first couple weeks I was on Lexapro, just standing up would make my head spin. I was always dizzy. Like, if I hadn't been taking time off of work, I legitimately don't think I could have gone to work. It was that bad. And that started to get better over time, but I was getting headaches, I was getting stomach aches. I found that when I would lay down to go to bed, my thoughts would just start racing at a mile a minute. So mentally it did help, but physically I was just as useless as before, so it wasn't really a net gain in any kind of way. I actually skipped my own birthday dinner because of all these side effects, and that was sort of my cue that this wasn't working and I was going to get off Lexapro. I thought that having that experience might be enough, that having my brain acknowledge and realize the fact that there was this other part of it where these thoughts sometimes came from. I thought maybe having proven that, I would be able to just, silence those thoughts myself in the future, and that I'd be able to just move past it. Spoiler alert, that was wrong too. Things were a little better for a little while, and then got worse again. I went to NerdCon Stories in October of 2016, and I enjoyed it, but I very nearly didn't go at all because I just didn't think I was capable of enjoying it at the time. Anyway, fast forward to February of this year, after more stalling and insisting that I was perfectly capable of getting better on my own, it finally became clear that I needed to try something else. Went in again, and this time I got started on fluoxetine, which is, I believe, the generic of Prozac. I've always been really negative about antidepressants. I've never had anything against people who took them. I've just always been kind of afraid of them, I guess. You always hear about how we overprescribe them in America, which I do think is probably true, and I just really dislike the idea of being dependent on a medication. So I was really uncomfortable with having taken Lexapro to begin with, and also going back to try another one after the experience that I had with it. But this time the experience was quite a bit different. I didn't have that same myriad of side effects, and you almost don't even notice that it's happening at first, but I remember maybe like the second week that I'd been taking it, Melissa was doing the dishes when I got home, and she had a bunch of like baby toys that she wanted to wash, so I went to the sink and I was just helping her wash stuff and, trying to get through it faster. And she almost started crying, and I didn't know why. And she said it was because I was acting so relaxed and happy looking, and she actually couldn't remember the last time I had seemed like that, which was really sad to hear. And as resistant as I was to take on any kind of medication, the difference, I think, has been night and day. The past few months, I've been so much more present in the moment. I've been able to focus on things. I've been able to start. I'm 100% sure that my other channel, Lucency, would not have started if I hadn't been on this, and I am 100% sure that my relationship with Melissa and with my daughter, Ember, is so much better now that I'm not like that. It's not perfect. The one side effect that I have had from this is my stomach doesn't really get along that well with it, and occasionally I just wake up in the middle of the night and feel like somebody punched me in the stomach really hard. But honestly, that's entirely worth it for the clarity and the peace of mind and, the not being a human suck anymore. And I'm not saying that I don't waste time anymore, and I'm not saying that I'm cured. There are still bad days, and on those days I become convinced that the success that I've had with this so far has been a fluke, and it was just a brief vacation from what is now my normal. At least so far that has not been the case. Now I can smile at my daughter and actually be smiling. I can look back over the past few months and feel like I can account for almost all of that time. I mentioned earlier that I went to NerdCon Stories last year, and something I thought was really interesting is that there's this recurring theme of mental health. And so one of the nights at the conference, I found myself in a basement with almost entirely people I had only met as of NerdCon, and it was an extremely open and safe environment. Everyone was talking about some very personal things. Everyone in the room at some point was brought to tears over something, except me. When the topic of depression came up in that group, I still couldn't say, yeah, me too. One of the things that got us on that topic that night was John Green's, one of the things he had done on the main stage, one of the things he had talked about. And he brought up 3 points in his life where he's basically been hit extremely hard by depression. In one of those times, he talked about how every night he would have a detailed image of stabbing himself with a ceremonial knife that was on display at the place he was working for that summer. and no intention to do it, but it was just a recurring thought that he kept having. One of the other times he talked about a couple weeks where he basically spent most of his time laying on the floor and drinking Sprite. And the third thing was a time when he was dealing with writer's block, and he felt like maybe the medication he was on was oppressing his creativity, and he started to buy into the myth that mental health issues were linked with creativity, and that by taking medication he was stifling himself, and so he stopped taking it for a while. And surprise, that didn't go real well. And as he told those stories, I thought about how each one of them resonated with me in a way that I didn't like. I knew what it was like to be preoccupied with thoughts that, even though you had no intention of going through with, you couldn't stop having. I understood what it was like to just lay on the floor, and I definitely knew what it was like to resist medication and to glorify creative people who have suffered from mental illnesses as, suffering for their genius. I also remember thinking at the time, there's no way I could go in front of that many people and tell those stories if they were my stories. But then I thought that if he was up there and he was telling those stories, maybe it meant that he was able to tell them now because they were in the past, that he was in a better place on that stage than he had been when those stories had occurred. And that gave me the hope that there would become a time when I would be able to tell those stories, when I would feel like they were something from the past and not the present. And I'm not going to say that this is the end of this. I'm not going to say that I've figured it out, because I've said that a lot of times in the past, and I've been wrong every single time. The thing about epiphanies is that they're temporary. But I can say that I'm better than I've been in a very long time. And even though I don't like talking about it, I'm really glad to be in a position to say that part. Okay, so I don't really know how to end this video, so I'm just gonna go now and edit this together and cut out probably a good 30 minutes of quiet silence while I stared at the camera and tried to figure out how to do this. So I hope you're well, St. Elmo's Fire, and I'll see you soon.